So, hello, peace be upon you. Welcome to another episode of the Happiness Revolution, where I talk about stuff that will easily change your life, spiritual stuff that we've been ignoring for ages. Now we're kind of realizing actually we need that stuff. Yeah, it's really useful. Money doesn't buy happiness, so we need something else. And once we've learnt this stuff, it'll be really easy to pass on to other people, because once this spiritual stuff becomes more popular, we will have a happiness revolution, because the spiritual stuff is the essence of what we need as human beings. We need this more funny stuff like connection and all that kind of stuff, which spirituality talks about. And so that's the introduction done. What am I going to be talking about? Just forgive me, by the way, I'm kind of staring into an extremely bright flash which is recording on my mobile phone, because I've given up using the other thing, I think, that I was recording on. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about prophecies. So I'm going to try to keep this short because there's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to try to cover the major ideas. So prophecies, they can be true, they can some be false, and they can be extremely important. And surprisingly, something you might not know is that there are a lot of prophecies from different religions that all agree for a certain point in time. So you got, but people don't necessarily connect them, you see, because of issues developed by non-spiritual people in those religions. I'll very briefly explain that. So you can ask Buddhists that, is there a second coming of Buddha? They say yes, and he's supposed to be coming around now in the latter days. And then you can ask the same to Muslims, there's supposed to be a second coming of the Prophet of Islam, or a Messiah, or a Mahdi, they have different names, right? Buddha's a name, the Mahdi is a name, and he's a reformer also, who's supposed to be coming in the latter days, which are supposed to be around now. And so do the Christians. They said Jesus was supposed to come back in the latter days, and so did Christian. And so did Krishna supposed to be doing that. And it goes on and on. It's weird. I mean, it's kind of a weird occurrence. There's these prophecies, all these prophecies coming around the same time. So, but there's been, I would say, there's a lot of negative propaganda. I've been talking about the BBC and all the news media, that they create sorts of very negative ideas about things that they know are really important. So they'll throw out things like Notre Dame and whatever. And I haven't fully studied Notre Dame, so maybe I have. I can't remember now, because I kind of go through stuff and I forget them sometimes. Maybe because they're not so important. But maybe I decided at some point that they weren't so important after studying them. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that they throw out lots of things that might give people the impression that all the prophecies that you see are totally useless and don't make sense. And what I'm going to suggest to you, that prophecies can be extremely important and easily understood without much effort, and easily proven in so many different ways, and they can connect, and they're not just prophecies for the sake of going, ooh, I know what's in the future. They're actually supposed to help us. So I'm going to try to keep things as short as possible, and I'm going to go through one prophecy that links a lot of different religions about the Antichrist. And to be super specific, I'm just going to talk about the most recent prophecies, which are the most detailed prophecies that come from Islam, you see. So I don't want to go into too much, but I did explain previously that all these different religions have a link that seems to connect them all, okay? And what it is the nearer you come to the fulfillment of the prophecy, the more detailed those prophecies become. It kind of makes sense. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but just to say that in Islam you have the most detailed prophecies about the Antichrist. And to describe the coming of the Antichrist, one thing that will help you know when the Antichrist has come is the donkey of the Antichrist. And that might sound very strange. And I don't want to just talk about the prophecies itself, I want to explain why all the people who doubt these prophecies is for different reasons. There are many different reasons why they might want to doubt it, why they're wrong, and very logical explanations. Very quick. I'll very quickly explain it, but I need to quickly explain the prophecy. So there's the Prophet of Islam would be sitting with his companions many times talking about this very important time when in the latter days there'll be an Antichrist and he would come along on a donkey. So I'm going to very quickly describe this donkey. One of the most popular things to describe about the donkey is that between the tips of his ears would be about 40 cubits, which I think are 40 arm lengths. And it'll be some people translate it as a very white donkey or a silvery donkey, depending on the translation. From the Arabic, by the way, because the Prophet of Islam spoke Arabic. And there'll be many descriptions. So there would be, this donkey would be very strange. It would be not an ordinary donkey in which this huge Antichrist. The Antichrist, by the way, is so tall that it would be above the clouds. It would be absolutely massive, and it'll basically run the world. Okay, so I'm trying not to explain what this Antichrist or what this donkey is. But hopefully you realise that you shouldn't be taking it literally already. But I've barely started explaining. Okay, and yeah, so this donkey would eat fire. This very strange donkey that the Antichrist would travel on, and it would take one step from the east, and the next step would be in the west. And some more descriptions are that it would be as if it flew in the clouds or something. And before it left, well, first of all, there would be openings on its side, and people would walk into its side, this donkey, and there would be an announcement before it left that the donkey is about to leave, and there would be comfortable seating and lighting within the donkey, very strange donkey, and all that time, while the donkey is eating fire instead of hay, the people who travel within it won't get burnt. So that's just the beginning of the description. But there is even more description. For example, at times the donkey would go through water and it would carry mountains of food, and it would only give it to people who would worship the Antichrist. Now, just to help people search out or Google these prophecies, the Antichrist is known as the Dajjal. Dajjal would be a way of writing in English, I suppose. Okay, you could spell it slightly different ways. So you would do that. Write prophecies, maybe. There is a word, and the sayings of the Prophet of Islam are called hadith. Hadith. So you could use a couple of those keywords and search donkey and see what you come up with, right? So there's a donkey, and you would only the food that this donkey would give while it's travelling on water, while it's carrying this mountain. It would only give it to people who worship the Antichrist. So hopefully you're putting one and one together and realising this description is basically the description of modern transport which uses firepower. And so, yeah, so we're describing the plane, we're describing the ships, whatever, and you can talk about foreign aid given to Africa, that most people realise that this food isn't, this foreign aid is, that given to Africa is not without strings, so I'm not going to go into that too much, but hopefully you should have realised already that what these things are, and these things came about at the time about 100 years ago. So it came about 100 years ago, and that effectively announced the coming, or described, or made people aware that the Antichrist must be around. If the donkey is around, so must the Antichrist. So yeah, and it was a very important mode for transport for not just the Antichrist, for people in general, but the Antichrist was who effectively owned it, and there are many other things I could talk about. But I'm trying to move on, and explain why these prophecies must be correct. First of all, these prophecies have been recorded for hundreds of years in printed millions of times throughout history, and they have been the same throughout time because there's a very precise way in which things were recorded and kept recorded. And interestingly, people didn't really understand the prophecies for a very long time. One other thing, I'm trying to go through things, the points very quickly. One other point is that there aren't all sorts of prophecies that contradict each other and have different ideas altogether. Um, they all these descriptions of the Antichrist are very very similar. They all point to in the same direction. Um, so there's not this idea we make millions of prophecies and maybe one or two come together to agree with it. There are hundreds of prophecies and they all seem to point the same direction. You can check these out. You can Google them yourself. Um, so what other points are there? Yes. So very interestingly, I'm going to make this my last point just to make round things up really quickly. Very interesting. You might think all the Muslims are happy to believe in this prophecy, and in fact, most of them would have difficulty accepting them because it means they have to. The time of the Antichrist was also to be followed by the second coming of the Prophet Muhammad, or his mirror image, as it were. Um, and that person has already come, but like the times of most prophets, they're not accepted, and so they have difficulty accepting this prophecy has already been fulfilled, although it's very hard to get out of it. But the way because then they would have to accept this second coming, and that would cause them trouble, I suppose, because they don't want to for different reasons. And anyway, so what do they say? They say that a lot of these prophecies are from what are described according to their definitions as the weak, not so reliable sayings of the prophet. See, there's these 6 most authentic books according to certain criteria and stuff like that. But let's imagine what we're talking about. We're talking about some amazing prophecies that are very hard to make up, and they've come true. So either these people who made it up, and then somehow these prophecies were recorded and kept for hundreds of years, the people who made it up were like geniuses or something, or extremely lucky, or they are from God, and they were correct prophecies, and the people who disregarded them only because of their own weaknesses. And remember, these prophecies were recorded 150 years. A lot of these sayings were recorded 150 years after the prophet. So we don't totally rely on them. This is just a beginning, giving you a tip of, it's sort of like a tip of the iceberg, explaining that there are these prophecies and they are related to something even more reliable, which is the Quran, but I don't want to go into that right now. Hopefully that gave you an idea of, at least give you an idea that there are prophecies and they are very clear and simple to understand and very hard to refute. And I think I've explained a lot of things. So I think I'll end that recording. I have to press the end record button by turning you around to the other way.